Arthur Vance felt the familiar tremor in his hands, a constant companion for the last decade. He looked down at them, resting in his lap. They were a cartographer's map of a life lived with purpose, the veins rising like blue rivers through valleys of wrinkled skin. Once, these hands could calibrate the most delicate of instruments, sketch complex schematics on a napkin, and assemble engines with a grace that bordered on artistry. They had built the cradle his daughter, Clara, had slept in. They had fixed her bicycle countless times, the grease permanently embedded under his nails a badge of honor. Now, they trembled, betraying the keen mind that still lived behind his tired eyes. He sat in the passenger seat of Clara's sleek silver car, a vehicle that smelled of new leather and a faint, cloying air freshener shaped like a pine tree. It was a smell he associated with sterility, with a life scrubbed clean of any authentic scent, like sawdust or motor oil, or the rich soil from his late wife's garden. His wheelchair was folded neatly in the back, a silent, metallic testament to the legs that no longer obeyed him. "We're almost there, Dad," Clara said, her voice clipped and distant. She had not looked at him since they left his small house, the house he had built with his own 2 hands 40 years ago. Her eyes were fixed on the road, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Arthur watched the gray, weeping sky. Rain spattered against the windshield, each drop a tiny explosion of distorted light. The wipers swept back and forth in a hypnotic, rhythmic sigh. He had lived in that house his entire adult life. He had brought his wife, Eleanor, there as a bride. He had raised Clara within its sturdy walls, marking her height on the kitchen doorframe year after year. Now, the house was empty. The furniture was gone, sold to strangers for pennies on the dollar. His books, his tools, his memories, all packed away or discarded, deemed unnecessary clutter by his daughter and her ambitious husband, Marcus. A new chapter, Marcus had called it, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. A better place for you, Arthur. More manageable. Arthur knew what manageable meant. It meant out of the way. It meant a burden neatly disposed of. Clara turned off the main highway, the car gliding smoothly onto the cracked asphalt of a desolate-looking gas station. A single sign creaked in the wind, its letters faded and peeling. It was the kind of place people only stopped at when they had no other choice. "I need to get some gas," she announced, her tone unnaturally bright. "And I'll get you a coffee. You must be cold." He was cold. A deep, penetrating cold that had nothing to do with the weather. It was the chill of finality, the ice of a love that had grown weary and then withered entirely. She pulled up next to a pump, the engine humming softly before she cut it into silence. The sudden quiet was deafening. Only the drumming of the rain on the car roof and the mournful groan of the sign filled the space between them. "I'll just be a minute," she said, unbuckling her seatbelt. She did not look at him. She could not bring herself to meet his gaze. He watched her get out of the car, a slim figure in a stylish trench coat, her heels clicking on the wet pavement. She moved with a purpose that felt rehearsed, a woman playing a part she had practiced in her mind 100 times. She fiddled with the gas cap, inserted the nozzle, and then walked briskly toward the convenience store, its fluorescent lights casting a sickly yellow glow. Arthur sat and waited. The minutes stretched into an eternity. He watched other cars come and go, their occupants anonymous faces behind rain-streaked glass. He saw a young man with kind eyes working inside, wiping down the counter. He saw a mother scolding her child in the back seat of a minivan. He saw life continuing, indifferent to the quiet tragedy unfolding in the silver car. His gaze fell upon his hands again. He remembered a specific winter, decades ago. Clara had been accepted into a prestigious university, an opportunity he had never dreamed of for himself. The tuition was staggering, a figure that seemed impossible. He had lain awake for nights, Eleanor sleeping beside him, the weight of his daughter's future pressing down on his chest. He owned a collection of vintage engineering tools, heirlooms passed down from his own father. They were his most prized possessions, not for their monetary value, but for the history they held, the connection to a lineage of men who built things that lasted. He sold them. He sold every last piece to a collector who didn't understand their soul, but appreciated their worth. He still remembered the empty feeling in his workshop, the bare pegboard where the polished steel and dark wood had once hung. When he gave Clara the money, she had barely registered the sacrifice. "Oh, good," she had said, distracted by a call from a friend. "I was worried I'd have to get a loan." The memory was a small, sharp stone in his heart. He had swallowed the hurt then, telling himself her future was all that mattered. He had made countless such sacrifices, each one a brick in the foundation of her success, a foundation she now seemed determined to demolish. A sound jolted him from his reverie. It was the click of the gas pump shutting off. He looked toward the store. Clara was not coming out. He squinted, his old eyes struggling to focus through the rain. He saw her emerge from a side door, her head down, her movements quick and furtive. She wasn't walking back to the car. She was walking toward the road, where another car, a dark, expensive sedan he recognized as Marcus's, was waiting. Confusion warred with a cold, rising dread in his stomach. She opened the passenger door of the other car, slipped inside, and closed it without a backward glance. The sedan's taillights flared red, and it pulled away, its tires hissing on the wet pavement. It drove past the gas station, past the car where her father sat, and disappeared down the highway. She was gone. Arthur stared at the empty space where the car had been. He didn't move. He barely breathed. He was a statue carved from disbelief and sorrow. She had left him. She had left him at a gas station in the middle of nowhere, in the pouring rain, with nothing but the clothes on his back and a wheelchair in the trunk of a locked car. The air in the car grew thick and suffocating. He tried the door handle. Locked. Of course, it was locked. He was trapped. A prisoner in the final act of his daughter's betrayal. The rain began to fall harder, a relentless, punishing downpour. It hammered on the roof, a deafening drumbeat of abandonment. The world outside dissolved into a gray blur. He felt a profound and terrifying loneliness, a solitude so complete it felt like the end of the world. He closed his eyes, and the image of her face, averted and ashamed, burned behind his eyelids. This was the better place Marcus had promised. This was the new chapter. It was a story ending with him, forgotten and discarded, a footnote in a life he had given everything to build. The cold seeped deeper into his bones, a physical manifestation of his heartbreak. He thought of Eleanor. He was glad she was not here to see this, to see what their daughter had become. The thought brought him no comfort, only a fresh wave of grief. He was utterly, devastatingly alone. The hours crawled by. Dusk began to settle, blurring the edges of the grim landscape. The fluorescent lights of the convenience store now seemed like a cruel mockery. a beacon of warmth and life that was just out of his reach. His body ached. The dampness aggravated the old pains in his joints, a constant grinding misery. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, a hollow, empty feeling. Thirst made his throat feel like sandpaper. He slumped against the window, the cold glass a shock against his cheek. He reached into his pocket, his trembling fingers fumbling for his old flip phone. It was a relic, much like himself. He flipped it open, the small screen glowing with a weak blue light. He pressed the speed dial for Clara. It rang once, twice, then clicked. Voicemail. The number you have dialed is not available at present. Please try again later. The automated voice was as cold and impersonal as his daughter's actions. He tried again. The same result. He dialed Marcus's number, his thumb clumsy on the small buttons. It went straight to voicemail. They had blocked him, or perhaps they had simply turned off their phones, unwilling to hear the voice of the man they had just condemned. He scrolled through his contacts. There was no one else. Eleanor was gone. His old friends from the workshop had either passed away or moved to warmer climates. He had allowed his world to shrink until it contained only one person, Clara. And she had just pushed him out of it. He tried her number one last time, a desperate, futile act of hope. As the call failed to connect, the screen on his phone flickered and died. The battery was gone. He let the phone fall from his numb fingers onto the floor mat. Another connection to the world severed. A car, a loud truck with mud-splattered sides, pulled up to the pump beside him. The driver, a large man in a baseball cap, glanced over. His eyes lingered on Arthur for a moment, a flicker of curiosity in his expression. Then he looked away, dismissing him. Arthur felt a hot flush of shame. He was a spectacle, an old man left in a car, a piece of human refuse. He shrank down in his seat, trying to make himself invisible. The humiliation was a physical thing, a sharp, bitter taste in the back of his throat. He had always been a proud man. He had valued self-sufficiency, hard work, and dignity above all else. To be seen like this, helpless and abandoned, was a torment worse than the physical discomfort. Later, a woman with a kind face noticed him. She was filling up her station wagon, her children visible in the back. She frowned, her brow furrowed with concern. She started to walk toward his car, her hand half raised as if to knock on the window. But then her phone rang. She answered it, her attention diverted. A brief conversation, a laugh, and then she got back in her car and drove away, her moment of compassion forgotten. Each passing car, each person who looked and then looked away, was another small nail in the coffin of his hope. The world was full of people, but he had never felt so isolated. He was a ghost, trapped between worlds, visible but unseen. The young man from the store, the one with the kind eyes, came out to collect the trash. He wore a blue smock with a name tag that read, Leo. Leo noticed the silver car, still sitting by the pump long after the sun had set. He walked over, his expression cautious. He cupped his hands around his eyes and peered through the driver's side window, then walked around to the passenger side. Their eyes met. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Arthur saw not pity or dismissal, but genuine concern. Leo tried the door handle. Finding it locked, he gestured, mouthing the words, "Are you okay?" Arthur could only shake his head, a small, weary movement. The gesture conveyed a depth of despair that words could not. Leo's eyes widened in understanding. He disappeared back into the store and returned a moment later with a tool used for unlocking cars. With a few deft movements, there was a click, and the door was open. A rush of cold, damp air filled the car. "Sir?" Leo said, his voice soft. "Are you all right? You've been here for hours." Arthur tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. A choked, rasping sound was all that came out. "Hang on," Leo said. He returned with a bottle of water and a steaming cup of coffee. He helped Arthur take a sip of water, his touch gentle and respectful. The water was life. It soothed the fire in his throat. "My daughter," Arthur finally managed to whisper, his voice hoarse. She left me." The admission, spoken aloud, made it brutally real. Leo's face hardened with an anger that was entirely on Arthur's behalf. "Some people," he muttered, shaking his head. "Come on, let's get you inside where it's warm." Leo expertly retrieved the wheelchair from the back, unfolded it, and helped Arthur transfer from the car seat. The movement sent jolts of pain through his atrophied legs, but the promise of warmth was a powerful motivator. Inside the small, brightly lit store, the warmth was a blessing. Leo sat him down at a small table near the back and brought him a pre-packaged sandwich. It was the most delicious thing Arthur had ever tasted. "I have to call someone," Arthur said, his strength slowly returning. "My phone is dead." "Use mine," Leo offered, without hesitation, pulling a smartphone from his pocket. Arthur's mind raced. Who could he call? There was no one left. And then he remembered. His wallet. He fumbled for it, his trembling hand struggling with the worn leather. Inside, tucked behind an old photo of Eleanor, was a single, crisp business card. He had carried it for 5 years, ever since the lawyer had settled his wife's estate. On the card were the name and number of a man he had never met, only spoken to through intermediaries. Mr. Thompson, his financial advisor. Eleanor had insisted on setting it up, a secret safety net woven from the patents Arthur had created in his youth. He had designed a series of high-efficiency geothermal regulators, innovations that were decades ahead of their time. He had sold the patents to a holding company for a modest sum, thinking little of it. But Eleanor, ever practical, had ensured the deal included royalties. Royalties that, unbeknownst to him, had been quietly accumulating for 30 years in an account managed by the discreet Mr. Thompson. On the back of the card, in Eleanor's elegant script, was a simple note. "Call when you are ready, my love." He had never been ready. He had never wanted to be. He had lived a simple life, believing his daughter would care for him in his old age, as he had cared for her. He had been a fool. He handed the card to Leo, his hand shaking so much the card rattled against the table. "Please," he rasped, "call this number." Leo looked at the expensive linen card, noting the prestigious firm name embossed in gold foil. He dialed the number, putting the phone on speaker. It was answered on the first ring. Thompson. The voice was calm, professional, and radiated authority. "Hello," Leo said, stumbling slightly. "I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Arthur Vance." There was a pause on the other end of the line, not of confusion, but of sudden, sharp attention. "Is he all right?" Thompson asked, his tone now laced with urgency. "Put him on." Leo held the phone to Arthur's ear. "Mr. Vance?" "Yes," Arthur said, his voice barely a whisper. "I have been waiting for your call for a very long time," Thompson said, a hint of warmth in his voice. "Eleanor told me you were a stubborn man. Where are you, Arthur?" Arthur explained his situation in short, halting sentences. The gas station, the car, the daughter. There was a long silence. When Thompson spoke again, his voice was cold as steel. Stay exactly where you are. A car will be there to collect you in 1 hour. Do not move. Do not speak to anyone else. Everything is going to be taken care of. The line went dead. Arthur looked at Leo, his eyes wide with a mixture of hope and disbelief. For the first time that day, a tiny flicker of light had pierced the overwhelming darkness. He wasn't entirely alone after all. He had Eleanor, still watching over him, and he had Mr. Thompson. Meanwhile, miles away, in the heart of the city, Clara and Marcus were celebrating. They sat in a restaurant so exclusive it didn't even have a sign, only a discreet brass plaque next to an imposing oak door. The air was thick with the scent of money, a heady perfume of expensive food, vintage wine, and quiet power. Clara swirled a deep red liquid in a crystal glass that was likely worth more than her father's entire wardrobe. To new beginnings, Marcus said, raising his own glass. His smile was triumphant, predatory. He had finally convinced Clara to sell the eyesore of a house and cut ties with her draining father. The money from the sale was the final piece they needed to invest in a speculative luxury condominium project that promised astronomical returns. To new beginnings, Clara echoed, her voice a little too loud. She took a large gulp of wine, hoping it would wash away the persistent, nagging image of her father's face in the rearview mirror. She hadn't used the mirror, of course. She had forced herself to look straight ahead, but the image was there anyway, seared into her mind. The confusion in his eyes, the quiet hurt. She pushed it down. He was fine. Someone would have helped him. The people at the nursing home she had called, the one she'd told him they were going to, would eventually send someone when he didn't show up. It was cleaner this way. A clean break. That's what Marcus had called it. Clara, darling, a voice purred, interrupting her thoughts. It was Marcus's primary investor, a man named Alistair, whose wife dripped with diamonds and disdain. Marcus tells me you're entirely self-made. It's so admirable. No family to hold you back. The wife, Beatrice added, her words a casual jab. Clara felt a familiar sting of shame. Her father, the grease-stained mechanic. Her humble childhood in the small house that always smelled of wood glue and soldering flux. It was a past she had worked tirelessly to erase. That's right, Clara said, forcing a smile that felt brittle. My parents passed away when I was young. I've had to make my own way. The lie came easily. She had told it so many times it almost felt true. It was the price of admission into this world, a world that had no place for disabled old men in worn-out cardigans. A true testament to your strength, Alistair said, nodding approvingly. Marcus squeezed her hand under the table, a gesture of affirmation. He was proud of her ruthlessness. They spent the rest of the evening discussing the future. They talked about penthouses and European vacations and the IPO of their new company. Their conversation was a fantasy woven from greed and ambition. As they spoke, Alistair mentioned a small, irritating obstacle. The only fly in the ointment is the rival bid from Sterling Dynamics, he said, swirling his brandy. They have some proprietary geothermal tech that's making our energy efficiency projections look archaic. Cutting-edge stuff. Marcus waved a dismissive hand. We'll outbid them. Money solves everything. Clara felt a strange, distant ringing in her ears at the mention of geothermal technology. Her father used to talk about it, sketching designs on scraps of paper, his eyes alight with a passion she had found embarrassing. She dismissed the thought as quickly as it came. It was a coincidence. Her father's ramblings had nothing to do with this world of high-stakes business. He was a relic from a different, simpler time, a time she was glad to have left behind. They left the restaurant hours later, stepping out into the rain-slicked city streets. The city lights glittered like a carpet of scattered jewels. Clara felt a surge of power. She had done it. She had finally shed the weight of her past. She was free. The feeling, however, was hollow. As Marcus's car sped through the night, her reflection in the window showed a woman with haunted eyes, a stranger she barely recognized. The freedom she craved felt suspiciously like a cage. Exactly 1 hour after the phone call, a black car, as silent and sleek as a panther, pulled into the gas station. A man in a perfectly tailored suit stepped out, holding a large black umbrella. He was the picture of quiet competence. He walked directly to the table where Arthur and Leo were sitting. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice respectful. "I'm Mr. Thompson. It's an honor to finally meet you." Arthur looked up at the man who had been a ghost, a name on a piece of paper for so long. Thompson's eyes were sharp and intelligent, but held a deep well of compassion. "Thank you for coming," Arthur said, his voice stronger now. Thompson's gaze shifted to Leo, taking in the young man's worn uniform and the genuine concern on his face. "And you must be Leo," Thompson said, extending a hand. "Mr. Vance's message said you were of great assistance. We are in your debt." Leo, flustered, shook the man's hand. "I just did what anyone would do." "Few people do," Thompson replied simply. "Now, let's get you out of here, Arthur." Thompson and his driver helped Arthur into the plush leather interior of the car. It smelled of old books and polish, a scent Arthur found deeply comforting. Before they left, Thompson turned back to Leo. "What do we owe you for your help?" Leo shook his head. "Nothing. Just take care of him." Thompson smiled, a rare, genuine expression. He handed Leo a card. "You are an exceptional young man. If you ever find yourself in need of a new opportunity, call this number. My firm values integrity above all else." With that, they were gone, leaving Leo standing in the fluorescent glow of the gas station, a piece of his future held in his hand. As the car moved silently through the night, Thompson began to explain. He told Arthur about the patents, about the small tech company that had first licensed them, and about how that company had been acquired by a larger one, and then an even larger one. He spoke of compound interest and stock options and a portfolio that had grown exponentially over 3 decades. The numbers he mentioned were so large they seemed abstract, meaningless. "Arthur," Thompson said gently, seeing the bewildered look on his face, "to put it simply, you are a very, very wealthy man. The house your daughter sold, its value was less than the interest your accounts accrue in a single day." Arthur stared out the window at the passing lights. Millionaire. The word felt foreign, absurd. He was Arthur Vance, the man with trembling hands and worn-out shoes. He had never cared for money, only for providing a good life for his family. It turned out he had provided a fortune, and he hadn't even known it. The irony was a bitter pill. "I don't want any of it," Arthur said quietly. "I just wanted a home." "And you shall have one," Thompson assured him. "A proper one. We have a property prepared for you, fully accessible, with round-the-clock care if you need it. Anything you want, Arthur. It is all yours." The news didn't bring him joy. It brought a profound sadness for the life he could have given Eleanor in her final years, for the opportunities he could have provided Clara without sacrificing his own history. Most of all, it brought the crushing realization that his daughter had not abandoned a poor, disabled old man. She had abandoned her father. The money was irrelevant. The betrayal was absolute. The collapse came faster than Clara or Marcus could have imagined. Their bid for the condominium project was rejected. Sterling Dynamics, armed with their superior and cost-effective geothermal technology, had not only won the contract, but had done so with an offer so aggressive it exposed the fragile, over-leveraged nature of Alistair's entire fund. Panic spread through their investors like a contagion. Alistair's company imploded overnight. The money from Arthur's house, which they had poured into the initial investment, was gone. Every last cent. The bank called in their loans. Their assets were frozen. The sleek silver car was repossessed. Then came the eviction notice for their sprawling, minimalist house. They were ruined. Marcus, stripped of his wealth and status, revealed the coward that lay beneath the veneer of success. He blamed Clara. "This is your fault," he screamed, his face purple with rage as he threw clothes into a suitcase. "Your bad luck. Your baggage." "My baggage?" Clara shrieked back, her world crumbling around her. "You were the one who pushed me to do it." "I pushed you to be smart, not heartless. You left him at a gas station, Clara. Who does that? It's like you cursed us." He left that afternoon, leaving her alone in the cavernous, empty house with nothing but foreclosure notices and the echoing sound of his accusations. Desperate and alone, Clara spent days trying to find a foothold, calling friends who no longer answered, seeking help from a society that only valued winners. One rainy afternoon, sitting in a cheap coffee shop, she was numbly scrolling through the news on her phone when a headline caught her eye. Sterling Dynamics attributes record growth to Vance regulator technology. Her breath caught in her throat. She clicked on the article. It detailed the revolutionary geothermal patents acquired decades ago from a reclusive genius inventor, a man who had recently activated his controlling interest in the patent's holding company. A man named Arthur Vance. The phone fell from her hand, clattering onto the floor. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Her father? A reclusive genius? A secret millionaire? The man who wore sweaters with holes in the elbows and fixed toasters for his neighbors. The truth hit her with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. The shame. The greed. The monumental, life-shattering stupidity of her actions. She hadn't just thrown away her father. She had thrown away a fortune. But even deeper than the greed was a sudden, agonizing understanding of the man she had discarded. His quiet dignity, his simple life. It hadn't been a failure. It had been a choice. She had to find him. She had to apologize. She had to get him back. She had to get her life back. It took her a week of frantic, desperate searching, but she finally found him. An inquiry at the patent office, a sympathetic clerk, a forwarded address. She found herself standing before a beautiful modern house nestled among pine trees, overlooking a serene glass-like lake. She saw him through a large picture window. He was sitting on a wide, sunny porch, a blanket over his legs. He was sketching in a notebook, a small, peaceful smile on his face. He looked happy, healthier, younger even. And standing next to him, adjusting his blanket, was a young man she recognized with a jolt of shock. It was the attendant from the gas station. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She took a deep breath, plastered a look of remorse on her face, and ran toward the porch, letting the tears she had been holding back stream down her cheeks. "Dad!" she cried, her voice cracking with practiced despair. Arthur looked up, his smile fading. His eyes held no anger, no hatred. They held only a calm, profound sadness. Leo stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Arthur's shoulder. "Mr. Vance is not to be disturbed." "He is my father," Clara sobbed, trying to push past him. "It's all right, Leo," Arthur said, his voice quiet but firm. "Let her speak." Clara fell to her knees before his wheelchair, a desperate, theatrical gesture. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she wept, grabbing his unmoving hand. It felt frail in her grasp. "I made a terrible, terrible mistake. I wasn't thinking. Marcus, he twisted everything. I was lost. Please, you have to forgive me." She looked up at him, her face a mask of misery. "Everything is gone. Marcus left me. I have nothing. I need you. We can be a family again, like we used to be." Arthur slowly pulled his hand from hers. He looked at her for a long time, his gaze patient and unwavering. When he finally spoke, his voice was not the weak, trembling thing she remembered. It was clear and steady, filled with a quiet authority that silenced her tears. "Like we used to be?" he began, his voice soft. "You mean, like the time you were 7, and I stayed up for 3 nights straight, building you a dollhouse with real working lights, because you said it was the only thing you wanted in the whole world?" Clara stared, speechless. "Or perhaps you mean, like when you were 16, he continued, his eyes distant with memory. "And I sold my car, the one I had rebuilt from scrap, so you could go on a school trip to Europe? I told you the engine had failed. I took the bus to work for 2 years after that, in the snow, in the rain." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the quiet air. "Do you remember when your mother was sick? You were in your final year of university. You said you were too busy with exams to come home. I sat with her, alone, for 3 weeks while she faded away. I held her hand and told her you loved her, that you were just busy building a future she would be proud of." A single tear traced a path down Arthur's wrinkled cheek. "And then there was the gas station, Clara. That cold, endless afternoon. I sat in that car, and I felt every single one of those sacrifices turn to ash in my mouth. I felt the cold of the window on my face, and it was warmer than the look in your eyes as you drove away." He looked down at his own hands, the hands that had built and fixed and provided for her entire life. "You say you have nothing. I had nothing my entire life but my love for you. And you took that, the one true thing I possessed, and you left it by a gas pump because it had become inconvenient." He finally met her eyes again, and for the first time, she saw not a victim, but a survivor. "You are not sorry for what you did to me, Clara. You are sorry for what you have lost. Your apology is not for my pain, but for your own. It is born of desperation, not remorse, and I cannot accept it." He took a deep, steadying breath. "I do forgive you. For my own peace, for the memory of your mother, I forgive the person you became. But I cannot allow that person back into my life. The price of your presence is my dignity, and I have finally learned its value. I have peace here. I have respect. I have kindness." He gestured toward Leo, who was watching with tears in his own eyes. "I have a son now, in all the ways that matter." He turned his wheelchair slightly, breaking their line of sight, and picked up his sketchbook. He was dismissing her. The conversation was over. "Please," she whispered, one last broken plea. Leo stepped forward gently but firmly. I think it's time for you to go. He helped her to her feet and escorted her off the porch, down the path, and back to the gate, her sobs echoing in the crisp, clean air. The gate clicked shut behind her, a sound of absolute finality. She stood there for a moment, a ghost at the edge of a life that no longer had a place for her. Then she turned and walked away, a solitary figure disappearing down a road that led to a future of her own making. On the porch, Arthur did not watch her go. He looked out at the lake, its surface calm and reflective. He felt a profound sense of release, as if a great weight he had carried for years had finally been lifted from his shoulders. He was alone, but he was not lonely. He was at peace. Leo came and sat beside him, not speaking, simply offering the quiet comfort of his presence. Arthur picked up his pencil and began to sketch. His hand, for the first time in a long time, perfectly steady. In the final portrait of his life, he was a man who had lost a daughter, but had found himself. He was Arthur Vance, a builder of things that lasted, and he had finally built a life on a foundation that no one could ever take from him again. Because some treasures, once thrown away, can never be reclaimed. And the love of a parent, squandered and discarded, leaves a void that no amount of wealth or regret can ever hope to fill.